Hey guys, I thought I'd talk to you guys today about the idea of systematic violence and just the cause of a lot of the wars and things like that in our society. So, if you're not aware of how the mind works, this is just one model, like one idea, which is a vast majority of the subjective thoughts that someone has is just made up of words. And these words sort of get layered over the top of perceptual or sensory information, and thus label everything that you see. So you may be looking like at a wall, for example. You look at a wall, and your brain sort of layers over what you're seeing, whatever that may be, whether it's just like a white beige wall, and it'll say wall. Okay, you'll see a person, labels over person. Now, this forms a kind of a literary matrix, like a matrix of words that are all around you, labeling what you see. And this is a kind of mechanism of control that can limit the number of choices you have. Because if you look at something, for example, under one perception, and a lot of success books are based off this, and you look at something under one perception, and that particular perception says, there's a starving crowd, and then you think the world is scarce and there's not enough to go around and yada yada. Whereas on the other hand, someone else comes into that environment and they look at a starving crowd, they go, a lot of people who want food, I have food, here's a way to make money, and the world is in fact abundant, all these people have money, they just need the food to be provided. That's a way to make a lot of money. Now, the difference between those two scenarios is really just words, because both times you have a starving crowd and you have a person who sees this, but one person's reality opens up more options to them which are more freeing, whereas another person's reality becomes starker, and with less options they feel powerless because everyone's starving. That's the belief they have, a generalization. When generalizations expand out in psychology, they tend to limit options that you have and choices you have. Now, that being the case, some very smart people have in fact constructed a lot of language to limit choices that we have in order to basically maintain a certain standard, I would say, of compliance from the mass population. And this is one of the reasons why schooling is so popular and so enforced by the government, because it allows them to sort of put a standard of thinking into people's heads so that the tribal and animalistic instincts are suppressed, right? Now, we are very, very animalistic in nature, but the point is that when you know these mechanisms are in place, these sort of control mechanisms, these structures of language that limit our ways of thinking of things, then you know where to look if you're looking at if someone's trying to control you. And really this can be seen in a lot of ways, but one way is whenever you're seeing in the media an iconic representation of something, like war on terror, right? Most people will that's the total thought process that they're left with then. Everything gets narrowed down into war of terror, and everything else outside of that is a conspiracy theory, and thus your options are limited. Either you're thinking of conspiracy theories or you're going with the narrative it's a war on terror. There's no in between. There's no complexity there, therefore limiting the number of thoughts or the way of thinking in which you can look at a problem or a challenge. Keeping the sort of less educated people out of the mechanisms and of control that exists in our society. Now, this in one way is a good thing, and in another way it's a bad thing. But when you see these control mechanisms, they have a downside, which is that if you were to want to make changes in our society for the better, you have no way of doing it because you don't know the mechanisms of control that exist over people. Now, I'm going to go even deeper on this topic and talk about another thing, which is the words themselves construct the, what would you call it, the precursor to the behaviors that you have. Okay, so you've got the psychology, and that all forms together with words, and that comes together. Those words come together as a precursor, like to an impulse, to to act on something, okay, whatever the desire may be. Now, with those precursors of behavior, they actually are the things that say if the language you're using in your head is violent or conflictive, which we're pretty much all taught to use that kind of language, where there is it's like neocon theory says, in order to unite a community or a country, you need a common enemy. Okay, so they start to create these enemies in the media, and in order to stick people together, and so there's constantly some form of threat or terror, or yada yada, to stick all the people together rather than them looking at the government. Okay, but the byproduct of this control mechanism is that people often go through their lives with a conflictive, agitated mindset. So they will interact with the people they love in a way with the same construct of language, and this will do what it does to the threat overseas, but it'll do it to someone they care about. So some of the ways you can identify this is when people make a judgment, okay, or a diagnosis, or label, okay, and all of these sorts of things are a part of that control mechanism, and it's part of the construct that, in fact, of language that is used to create a adversarial point of view. So, say you're in a conflict with someone you care about, and an argument, and in that argument, you'll say a statement like, "You always do this." Okay, and what you've done is you've actually created a you always or you never. You've created a generalization, and when a generalization expands out, you've limited the number of options that you have in that situation. When your body or your neurology and your nervous system feels that limitation, there's a form of pressure there, and that pressure will then come out and be vented out eventually on the person. Now, if you don't say it immediately, what's going on, then it stacks, and all these little things stack, and that's what happens in relationships that break up. Okay, and this all comes from just a construct that exists on TV. It's ruining real life relationships. Okay, so the whole idea is, what you've got to do is find a way to actually communicate with people that is not using these conflict-causing adversarial positioning mindsets. And I'm not the best person to talk about this. There's a few people on the internet who talk about non-violent communication, but the idea is actually correct. There's actually a linguist who doesn't really mention this exactly, but a guy called Noam Chomsky, who he talks about the power of language a lot, and he is a linguist, and it really does actually affect most relationships you see, because any argument that you see between people, oh, he's a this or she is a that, which is labeling, which is one form of language which is designed to create a conflict, or she's got this problem, he's got that problem, which is diagnosis, which is another form of conflict-causing language, adversarial positioning. So if you ever want, if in a relationship you're causing conflict all the time and you're forever widening the gap between you and someone else, how do you expect to love someone? I mean, love is essentially closeness and bonding, and if you can't separate yourself from a conflictive mindset, then you're forever widening the gap between you and the people you love. Okay, and this is a problem that is really caused by the conditioning we have in our society, right? And to be specific, what I'm saying here is, if not for media and advertising, okay, and schooling, if those institutions were not there, we would have way less of this form of conflict, because these are the places that this form of conditioning is basically conditioned into us. Okay, so one thing you can do is to start to ask yourself, is what the way that you're communicating actually coming across as conflictive? Is this coming from a conflictive standpoint? Would this language be something used to in fact create a gap or a lack of connection between you and someone else? And is it something which would be used in adversarial positioning in order to create a conflict over a long period of time? And if it is, then the best thing you can do, first step, is just listen. And when you listen, don't label anything, just repeat back and until you got the needs. Now, this isn't parroting. You want to paraphrase within your own vocabulary and what you really think they're thinking, okay, which isn't word for word, okay, but you want to see until something clicks and fits within your worldview and theirs, where they go, yeah, that's what I'm thinking and that's what I need, okay, because really these conflicts still only come up because of the needs of people, okay, because someone's got a need that's not being met. Like in an argument, a lot of times someone may not be feeling loved or someone's not respected, and they can't communicate that because, again, we're taught and conditioned into an adversarial point of view. We're not conditioned in how to get our needs met and how to make people feel loved in a way that is genuine because it's real and comes from something you really are and how you really do care about people. Anyway, guys, that's my rant on the society and these certain control mechanisms. Have a good one.